Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the SaharaGaming M808W. Now this is a microATX case. It costs less than £70 and it comes with 4 included case fans, and the 3 at the bottom are actually reverse blade fans. It's got 2 tempered glass panels on the side and the front and actually looks pretty good. But should this be your next microATX case, particularly if you're thinking for a budget orientated build, stick to the end of the video when I'll be sharing my thoughts on the case. But for now, let's take a look at the parts I'm going to be building with today. For the motherboard, I'm going to be using the Gigabyte B650M AORUS Elite AXICE. For the CPU, I'm going to be using AMD's Ryzen 7. It's the 7800X 3D. Keeping our CPU cool, I've got a 360mm AIO from Thermaltake. It's their TH360 V2 ARGB Sync Snow Edition. For RAM, I've got 32GB of Thermaltake's TOUGHRAM XG RGB D5 at 6200 megatransfers per second. For storage, I've got 2 NVMe drives for this build. The first is a Gen 5 drive from ADATA. It's their Legend 970 in 1TB capacity. And the second is a Gen 4 drive from Samsung. It's their 990 Pro in 2TB capacity. Powering the whole build, I've got a 1050 watt fully modular ATX 3.0 power supply from Thermaltake. It's their Toughpower GF A3 Snow. For the graphics card, I'm going to be using the Gigabyte Aero RTX 4070 Super. And for case fans, I'm going to be using SaharaGaming's Mirror 12 fans in white. Okay, that's all the parts. Let's get building. So I'm going to start by taking a detailed look at the case, and given this case's budget price, one feature I wasn't expecting was the absence of a front pillar. So our 2 tempered glass panels just join in this corner, and you're going to get a lovely look into your build either from the front or the side with the absence of this pillar. So to remove our tempered glass panel, we've got 4 thumb screws we need to remove, and then our panel is going to be completely free. We're just going to be able to pull it out and lift away. To remove our other side panel, we've got 2 non-captive thumb screws at the back we need to remove. And then with these removed, we're going to be able to pull the panel backwards and lift away. Take a look at the back of this panel. You'll notice we have 2 large areas of perforation. The one towards the back is for our power supply's intake fan, and this one towards the front of the case is for either fans or radiators that you can mount on the side. Now there is no additional dust filters, and SaharaGaming are just going with this mesh on the side. So taking a look at our front panel, it's good to see we've got very minimal branding on it, just SaharaGaming written in small text down at the bottom. It is possible to remove this front panel. So there's a thumb screw at the back we're going to need to remove. And then there's a little plastic spacer here that just comes off. And then we've got 2 screws at the top and 2 screws at the bottom to remove. And then with all the screws removed, we can slide this panel slightly to the left. That's going to free it up, and then we're going to be able to remove it from the case. So you can see with the tempered glass panel removed, there is quite a bit of flex on the top of the case, and it isn't going to be a good idea to remove this during the build. A lot of other cases that do have this feature where you can remove the front tempered glass panel as well as the side, there's often a little pillar here which provides support during the building process, or there's definitely a more rigid frame. I'm going to leave it out purely to get better shots during the build, but you should probably leave the glass panel in. In terms of our front I/O, we've got a power and reset button. We've got 3 USB Type A ports. One is a USB 2.0 port, and 2 of them are USB 3.0 ports. We've got a separate headphone and microphone jack. There's no USB Type C port, and then we've got an LED button to cycle through the effects on the case's built-in controller. On the top of the case, we've got a magnetically attached dust filter, which can simply be pulled away. And we've got another magnetically attached dust filter at the bottom. Just while we're at the bottom of the case, I do want to point one other thing out. You can see we've got mounting holes here for a 2.5-inch drive, so you're going to be able to mount one of these at the bottom of the case. So you can see the SSD mounting slot behind the pre-installed front fan, so you're not going to have to remove them to mount a 2.5-inch drive here. And you can see we've got mounting holes here for mounting a 3.5-inch drive down at the bottom, but this is going to mean you're going to have to remove the front fan. So it's great to see we've got 3 120mm reverse fans pre-installed at the bottom of the case, and the fan blades have been reversed, so they're going to be actually drawing air in from the case with the good side of the fans on display. And we've got a nice mirrored effect here and also on the sides of the fan, so hopefully these are going to look good. If you prefer at the bottom, you can mount up to a 360mm radiator, but it isn't possible to mount fans or radiators in multiples of 140. At the rear of the case, we've got our 4th and final pre-installed case fan. It is also a 120mm fan, and this time the fan blades are the correct way round, so it's going to be exhausting air out the back of the case. Again, there's no support for 140mm fans at the rear. At the top of the case, you can mount up to 3 120 or 2 140mm fans, or up to a 360 or 280mm radiator. while on the side it's up to two 140 or two 120mm fans, or up to 280 or 240mm radiator. So you are definitely going to want to occupy these fan mounting slots on the side of the case. These black cables are not going to look good, and you're definitely going to see them through this cutout, and even if you don't, this cutout is going to look absolutely horrible with the tempered glass panel on display. And I do really think Sahara Gaming should have included two reverse fans on the side of this case, or at the very least some little plastic cover plates that would cover this up if you didn't want to put fans on the side. In terms of motherboard support, the case supports both microATX and mini-ITX motherboards, and if you want to go with a CPR cutout, the maximum height supported is up to 160mm. You can see at the rear of the case we've got 5 horizontal PC expansion slot brackets, and you're not going to have problems fitting a large graphics card in this case when graphics cards up to a maximum length of 410mm being supported. So just before we move to the rear of the case, you can see we've got plenty of cutouts in sensible places, but unfortunately there's not a rubber grommet in sight. Moving into our case's rear compartment, so we've got our case accessory bag here, and in here we've got all these screws we're going to need, as well as some cable ties. So our case does come with a built-in fan and ARGB hub. The reason I'm holding it is we do have some double-sided adhesive on the back of it, but it's not actually stuck, so you can actually choose where you're going to stick it once you're done. We've got our LED cable in at the top, and that allows you to press the button on the top of the case to cycle through the ARGB effects. And we've got 2 PWM ports and 2 ARGB ports, and you can see our bottom fans are already connected up to it. And this is going to leave us additional ports here for our rear fan. So don't worry if you do want to add fans at the side. The fans Sahara Gaming use have these daisy chainable connectors. So we've got this one here for PWM, and there's another one over at this side for ARGB. So we're going to be able to plug our side fans into these additional connectors and control everything from this hub. In terms of the cables coming from the bottom of the hub, we've got a PWM connector, we've got an ARGB connector, and we're going to need to plug these into our motherboard to allow our motherboard to control the PWM and ARGB effects of everything plugged into the hub. And then we've got a SATA power connector, which we're going to have to plug in to power our hub. We've got a drive mounting bracket behind our motherboard, and on it you are going to be able to mount two 2.5-inch drives. They're going to simply sit here. You're going to be able to remove this panel and then screw them in from the back. So the panel is held on with 4 screws. So we turn the bracket round, as well as mounting your 2.5-inch drives and then just screwing them in from the back here. It is also possible to fit one 3.5-inch drive into this bracket. So you can see we've got this little cutout here for the cables. So your 3.5-inch drive is simply going to slot into here. And then if you look at the side of it, you'll notice we've got holes on each side to secure the drive into place. So our power supply is going to go down the bottom. We've got a little support bracket here and here. So you're simply going to slot your power supply in here. And the case is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 220mm. So just before we get on the build, there's a couple of steps to do to prepare our case. The first is to add the 2 additional standoffs we're going to need to secure our motherboard. Now, in the case accessory box, Sahara Gaming do include the additional standoffs, but not the standoff insertion and removal tool. So hopefully we are going to be able to put them in by hand. So the bottom one screwed in, no bother. This one is a little bit tight, so I'm just going to tighten it up with a pair of pliers. So case manufacturers really need to either insert all the standoffs or actually include the tool that allows you to do it. And the other thing I want to do is install our side fans, and Sahara Gaming have sent me this nice triple pack of fans. The only problem is these have the standard blades, so if I install them here, they're going to be exhausting air out the side of the case, which is really not what we want them to do. We want intake on the side, which means the bad side of the fans are going to be on display at the side. Now, I don't actually mind the bad side of the fans being on display at the bottom. So what I am going to do is install 3 of the standard fans at the bottom and move 2 of the reverse fans to the side. So I've got our triple pack of standard orientation fans, and these are just going to simply daisy chain together. If I turn them around, you can see we've got little connectors, and these gold contacts are going to join here. So all we're going to want to do is join our fans together and then push down to connect them together. And then same thing with this one, line it up and push down, and that's them locked together. Then we just need to add our fan cable into place. So it's just a matter of lining it up and then pushing up to lock it into place. So again, coming from this cable is similar to the fans we've already got installed. We've got a PWM cable and an additional splitter cable, and again an ARGB cable and an additional splitter cable to add other devices into. And with the triple pack of fans, you get this little controller, which is exactly the same as what we've got in the back of the case. Because we're going to be able to daisy chain our fans, we're not going to need to use the additional controller. So this is the orientation of the fans that we're going to have on display in the bottom of the case. And I just really don't think that QR code on the back of them is going to look very good, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Okay, so there we go. I think that looks a little bit cleaner. So we can set our fans into place at the bottom of the case, and we'll just pass the cables through to the back, and then we can get the fans screwed into place at the bottom. And then we can replace our bottom dust filter. Then we can take our 3 reverse blade fans that were at the bottom, and we're just going to separate one of the fans from them. And then we can set the 2 fans into place on the side. And then we'll get the fans screwed in from the back. And then we can just pull the fan cables through to the back. And then it's just a matter of getting everything connected up. So I'm going to take the PWM cable coming from our fans at the bottom and plug them into the hub. And also the ARGB cable coming from the bottom. We've got this daisy chainable connector coming from one of our fans, and I'm just going to plug the side fans into it. And then we'll remove the plastic protection from one of the ARGB cables that's already plugged into the hub. And then we've got the ARGB cable coming from our bottom fans, and we'll get it plugged into here. So that's all our fans connected up. We're now ready to start working on our motherboard, and we're going to be installing our CPU, our M.2 SSDs and our RAM before we put the motherboard into the case. To open the socket cover, we need to push this lever down and out to bring it all the way to the middle of the motherboard, and then we're going to be able to open the socket cover up. We can then lower our CPU down into the socket, making sure we've got the text the correct way up, and once we're happy it's sitting correctly, we can go ahead and close our socket cover down again. Then all we need to do is close the lever to secure the CPU in the socket, and normally this black bit of plastic will pop up more convincingly than this, but if it doesn't, you can simply pull it off and put it in the motherboard box for safekeeping. To install our M.2 SSDs, we're going to need to remove the heatsink. It's held on with 3 screws. So we can then take our Gen 5 NVMe drive and insert it into the socket, and then all we need to do is flatten it down, and the little clip is going to hold it in place. And then we take our Gen 4 drive, pop it into the bottom socket, and again flatten it down, and the clip will hold it in place. We then just need to remove the plastic protection from the heat sinks, and we can then replace the heatsink. We're going to be installing our RAM in the 2nd and 4th slot along from the CPU, so we can open the clips on these slots. Then all we need to do is line our RAM up with the slot, and once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure, and it's going to clip into place. And then it's exactly the same process with the 2nd stick. We can then insert the motherboard into the case, line it up with the standoffs at the back, and then we're going to secure it into place with the screws with a little lip around the outside. Next, we've got our case cables to plug in. Our HD audio cable is going to go into this header down the bottom left-hand side of the motherboard. So we'll bring our cable through the cutout, and we're going to need to plug it in with the HD audio text facing down the way. We've got a system fan header here, so I'm going to bring the PWM cable coming from our fan hub through and get it plugged in. And then we've got an ARGB header here, so we'll bring the ARGB cable coming from our fan hub through and get it plugged in. Next to that, we've got 2 USB 2.0 headers, so we'll bring our USB cable through and plug it in with the USB text facing up the way. Our front panel connector is going to go to this header at the bottom right-hand side of the motherboard, so we can bring all the cables through. And it is really important that you plug the cables into the right headers on the motherboard. So there's a diagram in the motherboard manual to help you. So just make sure you're plugging them into the same headers as I'm showing you in the video. And then we'll just pull all the excess cable through to the bottom of the case. Lastly, our USB 3.0 cable is going to go in this header here. So we'll bring it through the cutout, line it up with a header, and push into place. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. We're now ready to install our power supply, and I've gone ahead and plugged in the cables that we're going to need. So I've plugged in a 12-volt high power cable to power our graphics card, an 8-pin EPS cable to provide additional power to our CPU, our 24-pin motherboard cable, and a SATA cable, and this is going to power our ARGB and fan hub. We can then set our power supply into place at the back of the case, and it is important to make sure our power supply's intake fan is facing out the way. And then we can secure our power supply into place with the 4 power supply screws from the case accessory bag. Our 8-pin EPS cable is going to go into the center at the top left of the motherboard, so we can bring it in through the cutout, line it up with a header, and push into place. And then we'll just pull all the excess cable through to the back. Our 24-pin cable is going to go into this header here, so we'll bring it through the cutout, line it up with a header, and push into place. And then again, we're just going to pull all the excess cable through to the back. And then at the back of the case, we're going to need to plug the SATA cable coming from our power supply into the SATA cable coming from our case. We're now ready to start working our AIO, and the first thing to do is set our fans onto the radiator, and then we'll secure the fans into place with the long radiator screws that come with the AIO. Next, we need to daisy chain all the PWM and ARGB connectors together. So I'm going to start off with the PWM connectors and connect them up. And we get this long PWM cable, so I'm just going to plug the end on this end into the cable. And that's going to leave us a 4-pin PWM connector to plug into the CPU fan header on our motherboard. It's a similar process with our ARGB connector, so I'm just going to remove the plastic protection and line it up with the next ARGB cable, and then remove the plastic protection from that fan and line it up with the next ARGB cable. Again, we get a nice long ARGB cable to plug into the end, so I'm just going to remove the plastic protection and plug it into place. So this end is going to go into an ARGB header on our motherboard, and importantly, we do have an additional splitter cable to plug another device in, which is going to be handy when we come on to look at our pump. So coming from our pump, we've got two cables. We've got a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB cable, and we're going to be able to plug that into the splitter cable coming from our fans. And we've also got a 4-pin PWM cable, and we're going to plug that into the pump header on our motherboard. Next, we're going to need to attach the bracket to allow us to secure this to the motherboard. So we're going to use the AMD bracket, and it's just a matter of slotting it into place and pushing down. We're then going to want to put one of these little clips on each side. It's just a matter of pushing it through the hole and then taking one of the thumb screws and securing it on loosely to start off first of all. And then same thing on the other side. We can then insert our AIO into the case and secure it at the top with the short radiator screws. And we can then replace our top dust filter. Next, I'm just going to pass all the fan cables through to the back of the case. Our CPU fan header is this header at the top of the motherboard. So I'm just going to bring the PWM cable back through and get it plugged into place. Now we do have another ARGB header at the top of the motherboard, and we've got two options for our ARGB cable. We can bring it back through the cutout and plug it into the ARGB header on the motherboard. Although because we do have a hub at the back of the case, it probably makes more sense to plug our ARGB into here, and that way all the fans and the pump and the AIO are going to be able to sync up with the button on the top of the case and be controlled by it. So to do that, all we need to do is pull this rubber protector off, and then we're going to be able to plug our ARGB cable into here. Next, we can add some thermal paste to the center of the CPU. It is included with the AIO. We need to remember to remove the plastic protection from our AIO's cold plate. And then we just need to get the clips and the pump over the clips on the motherboard. So I'm just going to put the top one over the top bracket. There we go, that's it on. And then we'll try and get the bottom one onto the bottom bracket. So that's both them on, and all we need to do is tighten the two thumb screws up. Our pump header is just at the top below our CPU fan header, so we'll bring the cable coming from the pump up and get it plugged in. And then I'm just going to tuck all the excess cable up to the top of the case, and our ARGB cable I'm just going to pass through the back as well. And then at the back of the case we just need to plug the ARGB cable coming from our pump into the splitter cable coming from our fans. So our display on the AIO is rotatable, it just rotates round, so we can check we've got it in the right orientation once it's powered on, and we can remove the plastic protection from the pump. We're now ready to install our graphics card, so we're going to need to remove the first and second slot cover from the top. So we need to open this little door here. And then the slot covers in this case, you actually break away. So we're just going to push down from the top, and then if we bend it up and down, it should just break off. So next we can open the clip on the top PCIe slot on the motherboard, and we can then line our graphics card up with the slot. And once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure to the graphics card and it is going to clip into place. And then we'll secure the GPU into place with two of the same screws we used to secure our power supply into place. And then we can slot the bracket back into place. Then we can bring our 12-volt high power cable through the cutout at the bottom, line it up with the graphics card and push into place, making sure we get a nice satisfying click. So you might wonder why I've installed our AIO with the tubes towards the back where they are slightly blocking the fan. And the reason for this is because we've got an AMD motherboard. The pump can actually go in two different orientations. The way I have it here are upside down. And an Intel motherboard you can install it 4 ways round. And with the tubes at the front I did line it up, and one way round they were too short for the pump to reach the motherboard, and the other the cables were just run at a really awkward angle. The advantage of having that at the back is, particularly with the side fans, is you're going to have a great view looking in from the front and the side. Now the only problem I am getting with the tubes at the back, they are catching on this rear fan. Two options here. I could put something in behind the tubes here to lift them away from the fan, and that would solve the problem. Although I don't actually think we need this rear fan behind the tubes. We've got 3 exhaust fans at the top, which is going to be absolutely fine for this case. So I'm just going to remove the rear fan. So one of the advantages with these little clips, all I need to do is pull the clip towards me to free it up, and then we're going to be able to pull it to the back of the case and out of the way. I'm just going to slide our front tempered glass panel back into place. And then at the back of the case, we've got some cable management to do. So that's the PC complete and looking great. I've gone ahead and set it up. If you don't know how to install Windows, adjust all your BIOS settings, adjust your RGB, I've made a separate video covering all of that, and I'll put a link to that video in the description. But what I want to do now is take a look at the temperatures. So our 7800X3D idled at 40 degrees and reached a maximum of 83 degrees during a 10-minute idle 64 stability test. Our RTX 4070 Super idled at 28 degrees and reached a maximum of 61 degrees during the stability test. In terms of noise, the average noise at idle was 37 decibels and 54 decibels under load. So in terms of the temperatures, these were excellent. Noise levels were a little bit noisier than what I would like, and that was running all the standard motherboard fan curves. Sitting beside the fans now, I have turned them right the way down, and they're lovely and quiet, running nice and slow. So again, there's loads of headroom in this build. If I was setting this up for myself, I would just have the fans turned right the way down where they are lovely and quiet at idle. So moving on to my experience of building in the case, and certainly taking off the front tempered glass panel, I had lovely access to the build. Probably the only thing I would say is there was quite a bit of flex on the top of the case with that tempered glass panel removed at the front, so I wouldn't recommend you guys doing that. As I said, the only reason I did it was to get good shots during the build. And the other thing to be careful of is installing your power supply. Once it's installed, it's going to be more difficult to route some cables through the cutouts at the bottom, so I would pass all your cables first before installing your power supply. So now I want to share my thoughts on the case, starting off with the things I liked about it. And I think the first thing I liked about this case was the price. At less than £70, I think you're getting an awful lot for your money. With a case with tempered glass on the front and the side, the pillarless look, so the two tempered glass panels joining at the front, looked absolutely brilliant. In terms of the included case fans, you're getting 4 included case fans, and Sahara Gaming do sell 3 of these fans for around about £35. So when you factor in that you're getting 4 of these fans, you're really only paying about £24–25 for the case itself. So these are good looking fans with nice ARGB effects on them. The 3 fans at the bottom are the reverse fans, which actually look really good. You've got a nice PWM and ARGB controller, and it's really straightforward to press the button on the top to cycle through the various ARGB effects, and then all you need to do is hold that button in and it will sync up with whatever you've got your motherboard set to. And importantly, these are PWM fans, and if you do adjust the settings in the BIOS, you are able to get them running nice and quiet. So there definitely is a lot to like about this case, and I want to move on to the things I didn't like. Now, you would think given the price I'm going to cut the case some slack, but Sahara Gaming have asked for my feedback. They're looking to improve their products, so I am going to be very critical of the case. I have made a list, and in terms of the things I didn't like, I think the first thing I didn't like about this case was the mechanisms for securing and removing the panel. They are just a little bit old now, and there is more modern, better mechanisms for doing this. We had 4 non-captive thumb screws to remove the tempered glass panel, and again 2 non-captive thumb screws for the rear panel. So probably my biggest problem with the case was the large open cutout to the right hand side of the motherboard, and Sahara Gaming really should have installed some case fans there. They did a brilliant job with fans at the bottom and fans at the rear, but I really think the fans should have been over toward the right hand side of the motherboard, because without fans there, the case is going to look absolutely ugly. And you're just going to see all the cables at the back of the case, particularly as the case cables are black and I've got the white version of the case. So the fans at the bottom don't really need to be there. They would have been much better installing 2 fans on the side and 1 rear fan, and that would have kept them within their budget without spending extra money. Or if they really wanted to treat the user, they could have kept the 3 reverse fans at the bottom, the standard fan at the rear, and added 2 reverse fans in on the side. Alternatively, there could have been a cover plate to cover that large cutout, but in reality, when the fans are this cheap and this good looking, I would have gone with 2 extra fans on the side. So because you are having fans on the side, I do think that the perforated panels at the back should have had dust filters on them, because you are probably going to want to have those intake. There's dust filters everywhere else in this case, really good, nice magnetic dust filters, and they were just really missing from the perforations on the side panel. Another thing I absolutely hate about this case, and I wish case manufacturers would just get rid of it, and that is the breakaway PCIe slots at the back. They really should just include standard slots so you can put these back in when you're finished. Another thing I really don't like case manufacturers doing is either not including the standoff insertion or removal tool, or not putting all the standoffs in. So you either need to include all the standoffs the way that most people are going to build in this case, and in general, most people are going to be putting a microATX motherboard rather than a mini ATX motherboard. So either put all the standoffs in or give us the tool that we need to add the extra standoffs in. So I've already mentioned it a little bit. Another thing I didn't like was the black cables in the white case. It was great that the fans have white cables, but the case cables were black. And in general, I think if Sahara Gaming had matched the case cables, made them in white, it would have improved the feel of the case. Again, not always a feature you're going to get in a budget case, but I do think the front panel connectors, a lot of manufacturers now are combining these into a single cable, and this would have been much easier to use than the individual pins that you had to plug in. I do also think it would be nice to have a front panel Type-C connector. Most motherboards nowadays are going to have one of these headers, and rather than giving us the extra USB 2.0 Type A port, a front panel Type-C would have been a much better option, and even budget cases now are including these. In terms of cable management, that was another area where the case wasn't great. I think that's a combination of the fact that there's no rubber grommets, so you can see the cables at the back looking in from the front. Although there was plenty of cable tie-down points and cable ties included in the case accessory box, I do think there should have been some cable clips in that central area, as well as some Velcro cable straps to help manage all those cables in the middle of the compartment. So putting all that together, should you go out and get this case? And I think it depends on what you're wanting to do with it. The biggest issue you're going to have is that large cutout to the right hand side of the motherboard. There's 2 options for fixing it. If you're happy with simply moving the bottom fans up and putting them on the side and running it without fans at the bottom, you like the look of that, you're not going to have to spend an awful lot of money to get a sort of reasonably good looking budget microATX case, and you're happy with the compromises that the case has that I pointed out, then you're absolutely fine. You're not spending a lot of money and you're getting a pretty good looking case. So if you are wanting the fans at the bottom, this is where I have a problem with this case, because you are going to have to go and pick up an additional set of 3 fans. Problem is, Sahara Gaming, I don't think at the moment sell the reverse fans, so you're going to have to do a bit of moving about like I did. And the price of that case is then going to take you up over £100. We're getting into a lot of competition at that price point. There is better budget cases with much better mechanisms for securing the panels, rubber grommets, other nice features included in them that this case doesn't have. So I wouldn't recommend the case in that scenario. So I think it really depends on whether you're happy with the compromises and how you want to build in the case. So hopefully you have enjoyed this full step-by-step PC build guide. If you have, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.